Hey, music.
Hey, good morning, good evening. How we doing?
Good morning. Good, you?
Oh, I'm having a good life and just enjoying a little morning meditation and some journaling and yeah, looking forward to chat and seeing where this conversation goes.
Oh, that's beautiful. When you say a good life, it reminds me of Wim Hof because always used to say after the meditation, have a good life, have a good day, have a good life.
Maybe that's where I subconsciously got it from. I went through Wim Hof's breathing and stretching course many years ago, probably 10 years ago, and I really enjoy Wim Hof's energy and just this idea that we should embody life rather than having it be this intellectual construct.
Yeah, I am also a fan of him. I think that's when I got into breathing, to be honest, because I wasn't into the pranayamas at all. I didn't know about them, and he just introduced them to the West, right? I mean, it's, fire breathing sometimes and all of these nice things. It feels so good. I think once I probably passed out because like the period where you don't breathe, it lasted for like 4 minutes. So when I looked at the clock, no way I held my breath so long, and it gets you into the body for sure. I started feeling all these sensations in the body. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful example of entrepreneurship and spirituality. Like he made it.
for sure. He did such a good job of combining those worlds and he is a super intelligent guy and kind of tapped into to his creative knowing, but I think he also did a really good job of just attracting the right people into his tribe because he has great community managers, he has great marketers, he has connections into legacy media, and so a lot of that came together by him focusing on I think the thing that he likes to control, which is just being an interesting person.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Wim Hof, especially, he popped out up in my radar when I saw him, I think, speaking with Joe Rogan or so, right? So on a very mainstream kind of platform. And for some reason, I'm not sure how you get into Joe Rogan's show, to be honest. And if you need to have certain connections or so, or maybe you're just really genuinely an interesting person. He's a little bit of an eccentric, which is beautiful. So I like his style and the way he talks, and it resonates deeply with me. And to can kind of see a little bit of like suffering in his soul. I think he lost his wife or so in the past, if I remember correctly. So I don't know exactly what happened, but it's usually like this connection or this experience of suffering that also leads to like some spiritual longing almost, or to like to find a way out in a certain way. And yet, it kind of he popped up on my radar a couple of years ago, and for some reason, yeah, he made it into the mainstream consciousness. It's just an interesting kind of side comment.
Yeah. Well, I think that the body, like doing any type of body or breath work, is such an interesting gateway into other spiritual endeavors and incorporating that because more than anything the body gives you such direct feedback. I mean, because we have this satellite dish that is our nervous system that is just picking up on all of the subtle energy. As you start to work with the body, it's such a good training ground for being able to understand how to create outcomes, desired outcomes in the rest of your life. Because we know intimately that in the body, if I'm overweight, I'm not going to be able to not be overweight tomorrow, but I can start to feel better immediately. I can start to get confirmation that I'm on the right track immediately. And we don't ever discount that if I go to the gym every single day and I find some way to get in alignment with my workouts, that eventually I'm going to feel strong and fit in my body. And we just recognize that there's a gestation period that happens in the body, just like when you're birthing a baby, there's a 9-month gestation period, and you don't actually want to speed that up because that time is required for all of the dots to connect and all of the energy to come in. And Wim Hof kind of puts you on that journey of recognizing that you can do something in your body and you can see some immediate effect of it, but really you start to recognize that there's a long tail path from it. And if you can connect in how you create things in your body to how you create things in anything, in your relationships, in your business, and into, any outcome that you're trying to create, if you can form the analogy that it's going to be similar to how you create positive outcomes in your body, that can really set you up for success on being able to enjoy the process and trust that things are happening in the right way, rather than becoming immediately frustrated that it all hasn't happened and manifested right away.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think many people would start also, let's say, with meditation, any kind of spiritual practice. The danger with that is that you grow dissatisfied, or maybe you consider it to be difficult and challenging. It's like a chore almost if you go at it with the wrong mindset. So you try to achieve a goal, right? So kind of want to get somewhere, to have results. You treat the practice as a means towards an end, and then you will suffer actually. So it's an interesting kind of thing to observe. While let's say we flip this around or reframe this a little bit, and let's make this fun, right? So it's something that is enjoyable and part of your life. So if you manage to do this, then it you want to do this then, right? And even let's say you go into like deeper territories of your mind, so really going into darker places that you might repress somehow, that's not necessarily a nice thing. I totally get that. But on the other hand, you can embrace this a little bit, this suffering, with some playful curiosity, and just to be open to that. But I think it's a little bit of an acquired taste. So I totally understand people who might have some resistance towards reaching out into those more deeper dimensions of their mind. They might struggle with certain patterns that are certain events coming up in their mind, and this is not necessarily a, a joyful thing. But on the other hand, just let's say you are healthy and you are not necessarily under stress, or don't even necessarily have anxiety, but you just sit down, let's say, to meditate, then you might want to get somewhere, right? So then you still grow dissatisfied, and you grow impatient, and why am I not focused enough, and why can I can't I keep the concentration? Why can't I keep the attention on something, right? And it's an interesting thing. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where the goal should be, enjoying the process, right, like finding a way to get up to speed. You said playful curiosity, and that's the right spirit for exploring all spiritual things. I mean, basically everything can be a spiritual thing with the right intention and the right level of consciousness, and the right focused or directed energy. And so that spirit of playful curiosity is such a good way to create anything without being attached to it. Because it's a level of experimentation where it's almost like you have this puzzle on the table in front of you, and you know that all of the pieces are there, and so there's an expectation that you can get to the end, but you're also not attached in any real way. There's a quote from an old movie that desperation is a stinky cologne. And I think what happens is that when you start to feel desperate for an outcome, that's when you've completely shut down any intuitive flow, because that desperation takes you out of that flow. It takes you out of being a clear creative channel, where when you're putting together a physical puzzle, there's just an expectation that the answer exists. The puzzle can be completed. The whole purpose of the puzzle is to complete it. And life is similar to that. Like there is a type of completion. And of course, we're never complete, and that isn't necessarily what we should be striving for, but there are levels to the maze that we can find, and kind of stake our flag in, and enjoy and operate from before we go up to the next peak. And completing that kind of puzzle image is really just more like a feeling place of expectation that I know answers are available, and I know that I will connect the dots in perfect timing, and I will know what I need to know when I need to know it. And any worry or doubt about, what's going to happen 5 steps from now is just not being present. And presence is where all the power lives. And so whether it's breath work or exercise or meditation or mudras, there's plenty of ways to get into the flow. But you know I my girlfriend had a teacher that used to say you kind of have to minnow around a little bit. So you're just kind of swimming around and trying things. I'm maybe in the past I've called it a scatter shot approach, where you're like, okay, there's 1,000 different entry points into this flow. Let me try some things out and see what resonates with me right now. And for many, breath work and breathing is the easiest way to get up to speed with some of that flow and open up their awareness in a way where they can actually start to see some of the data points that maybe were obfuscated from them before they started to raise their energy. And, since this call is about, this merger of spirituality and entrepreneurship, for me, that is what building a business looks like. It's about finding that flow first, always, making that the number one bullet point on your business plan. How am I going to run this business? I'm always going to find flow first and then operate from inspiration.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful point. I think it ties very well because while you were speaking, I was also matching everything to business and entrepreneurship and how it is so spiritual. I mean, people want to see it as not spiritual, but ultimately you're the vessel for all of this, and your limits, your trauma, other things that gonna limit your business and your entrepreneurship, right? And your flow. Again, you mentioned that. That's precisely so beautiful about it. It's almost like a contradiction, but you learn to manage that. It is the anxiety, the desire to be somewhere, to make more money, to have more clients, to whatever, right? Or to do it faster. But if you just focus on that and lose complete track of the body and the flow, then it's going to be counterintuitive, counterproductive, right? And so all the things that you train for in your meditation and your spirituality, which is like your clarity, your intuition, they're going to help you. Like if you have better intuition and clarity, you're not going to take that bad client decision, whatever, because you're in tune with your body, not only with the desire for more. And that will also expand depending on how you expand. That's how I see it more now, right? If you're empty, if you're clear, if you're peaceful, you have more space for the business, for the things to happen. And I would love to ask or for you to elaborate on that, because this is the first time someone has said the first thing in your business you should have in mind is the flow. And that's lovely. Like I'm really liking where that's going.
Yeah, well, I think so. I work with a lot of executives. In my real life, I'm a corporate consultant in venture capital, and so I work with a lot of people that don't use spiritual language, but they all understand what a gut feeling is. They all understand when they've had an intuitive hunch. They all understand what it means to be in the zone and firing on all cylinders. And so the reason that the number one thing we all need to do in our business is find alignment is because that's how you engage those intangibles. And at the highest levels of business, those intangibles are what separate the winners from the losers. And of course, at the highest levels of business, everybody's winning. However, if you want to be the best at what you do, you really have to engage those intangibles. And, going back to our earlier points about being in the body and using the body as a training ground for business, we can learn a lot from how professional athletes think about their career, because anyone can be a competent athlete and not necessarily engage those intangibles like intuition, visualization, energy management, energy flow. You don't necessarily need to have a context for all of those things to play in your neighborhood league. But if you want to win the Olympics, you better believe they're all operating in those intangibles and tapping into the latest consciousness and noetic science and bringing that into their practice. Visualization is a huge part of gold medalists' performance practice, and the way that they get that couple of nanoseconds that separates gold and silver. And the same is true in your business. Anyone can slog through life and effort their way into a successful business. You see it all the time, and we actually celebrate hard work. It's that hustle harder culture, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. Because once you if you make finding alignment and flow the most important thing, you're going to see from this 30,000, 100,000 foot perspective how all the dots connect. And the outcome will be that you're totally present and having a great time building your business. You're not living in fear of the future or guilt from the past. You're just knowing what you need to know when you need to know it. And the way that looks to people outside of you is that you're highly productive. You're working hard. They think you're part of the hustle harder culture. People always tell me in my real world job that I'm one of the most attentive and hardest working people in my industry. But it doesn't feel that way to me because I only do things that I like. I show up and I find processes that I will enjoy doing. And if I can't do it through a process that I enjoy doing, that means that I haven't found my true connection to source, my true connection to that creative flow. So when a task feels difficult, and of course, every day I have a list of tasks and maybe half of them I don't actually want to do at first. And so what I do is I soften towards those tasks. I really feel some of that discomfort in my body. I let that pass and find a balance point because if I'm feeling uncomfortable or angry or agitated about a task, it's because I'm labeling the task in some way that doesn't serve me. And the beauty of me being a spiritual being is that I have the creative freedom to label anything however I want to label it. And then my nervous system will follow suit with that. So if I'm labeling a task as difficult, it's going to show up as difficult because I'm an infinite creator and my words are spell work. And so what I do is I sit with those uncomfortable tasks and what I'm feeling for is what label have I given this task? When I look at my business plan and part of it overwhelms me, like what are the labels that I've given the tasks that are related to that particular thing? And if I can feel through that discomfort, it will always dissipate. And that dissipation feels like kind of when you take a sip of hot tea or a glass of wine, like you feel that warmth flow through you. And that's that trapped trauma, something from the past that you weren't present enough to feel, that's coming up, releasing back into creative potential, making your satellite dish stronger. And now, from a place of non-judgment and non-attachment, you can approach those same tasks with, as you said, that playful curiosity, and you can find ways to do those in a way that aligns with flow. You will find a process that you can actually be up to speed with. Sometimes that process is learning how to delegate things, making sure that you have a competent team underneath you, making sure that you have friends that you can be in partnership with on some of these things. And other times it's I attracted the perfect Twitter post, the perfect YouTube video, the perfect book that gave me a process that felt so delicious to me that then I was excited about that task. And that's why the flow is important, is because you're going to see those data points and you're going to find the way to do something that feels good. And when a process feels good, you actually want to show up for it. I've, again, going back to like the body being a perfect training ground for kind of dialing in some of the neural pathways that are required for success in business. When you're looking to, shed excess weight or build muscle, going to the gym and doing what or doing what David Goggins tells you to do might feel uncomfortable. You may not want to, run 10 miles a day and wake up at 3 a.m., but maybe you want to go canoeing for an hour. Maybe you want to go on a hike up a mountain, and so you can find these interesting processes that serve the same outcome. You're finding fitness in your body, but you did it in a way that aligned with your desires and your playful curiosity. And so, I'm drawing that analogy to the body strongly, because I do think that if you can, anytime you find discomfort in your business, recognize that when you're at your peak strength and training in the gym, there's also discomfort there. But in your body, you recognize that discomfort is temporary. And the same is true for your business if you can learn to sit with that discomfort and transmute it.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. Maybe just as a short introduction, so we went straight into the meat of the topic, which is great, right? But I guess we never really started introducing yourself, but you introduced yourself somewhat already. But kind of the topic like merging spirituality with entrepreneurship. But I would almost also translate that into how to merge that with life in general, right? Kind of, I mean, we are living in life and we're doing business, we're living with family, we're doing human stuff, right? We're just living, and spirituality is not like something that you do like in a monastery or on a cushion in a temple or in a church. It's just something you do right now. It's just you are a spiritual being in this very moment. And sounds a little bit woo-woo, I guess, if you say something like this in certain circles. On the other hand, some other people, they resonate with it because it's true, right? We're all divine spiritual beings, and then it's just a matter of language. And in our last space, you mentioned something very interesting, and this would be like one of the main questions for me. So how to actually translate those maybe somewhat woo-woo sounding concepts of spirituality that in reality actually apply to every single being that exists, right? So then this is also a challenge I face with interacting with anyone, actually. So you interact with family members, with coworkers, and maybe with executives and companies, and then depending on what language you use, they resonate differently. So they totally shut off and they think, what are you talking about? Or really, maybe they are somewhat spiritual already, and then they know exactly what you're talking about. But I can imagine like some company settings, and you mentioned you are a corporate consultant, right? And in such a setting, um, and you mentioned this last time, I think it is not necessarily resonating to use such a language. So that is kind of the first question. Maybe just two short comments as well. So you mentioned David Goggins. We also mentioned him quite a bit, and it's really an interesting character. I just recently finished his second book, his audiobook, so very much recommend it. So it's a really great book. It's a really interesting way to observe his mind. So kind of he pushes through with a certain kind of harshness and hardness, but going back to like his past where he came from, it's a beautiful thing to witness. And but that you can still somewhat feel somewhat negative energy in what he says, right? It's kind of like there's still some lack of peace. On the other hand, there are always some limits in your mind that you create for yourself, and he describes it beautiful how you actually can overcome those limits, or how he does it himself. That's kind of one just short comment. The other one is like, I totally agree also with the body, uh, how important the body is. So first of all, how to embody the whole process and the whole spirituality, like your spirit, which kind of is non-physical, but with your physical body, to embody that on the one hand, but just also take care of your body. So just doing the exercise and just taking care of its needs, and to be compassionate to it. So to not feed it junk, right? And all these things that are kind of basics. And for me, we're talking a lot about this, to make this really for me, spirituality begins actually with the body. So if you don't care about your body, then kind of you lack a little bit of compassion towards the body. Just so, but going back to the question itself about like the language, and maybe it's a very last point. So thanks everyone here who has joined, and if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and ask questions. So we want this to be very open for everyone, just to be very valuable to anyone. So if anyone has questions, please raise your hand, and happy to answer anything. And yeah, what do you think about like the language aspect?
Yeah, well, it's important, right? Because language is how we program reality in many ways, and we can do it from a more energetic level, but especially in modern culture, language is code, and so learning to tap into our own authentic creative channel helps us find that language. And part of an expansion in consciousness is that you become more empathic of the energies in the room, and then that energetic soup can be channeled through you, and the words just find you. So you know I guess the right answer, if there was one, is that don't try to pre-plan what you're saying. When you're present and you're truly a clear, open channel, you are literally channeling the energies in the room, and the energies in the space, and the energies in the people that you're interacting with. And so the right language is going to find you. When you're trying to seek it out, there's a kind of desperation in seeking. And of course, seeking done with that playful curiosity is fine, and it is part of the empowerment process. However, there's a fine line between playful curiosity and a desperation that if I don't find this language, I'm not going to be able to connect with people. And you want to make sure that you're tuned into your gut and your nervous system enough to know on which side of that coin you live. And so, for me, in the corporate world, executives like sports. And so sports is a great analogy. So if you're somebody who enjoys sports and enjoys watching, people who are in peak fitness and pushing their body, or not even pushing, like finding alignment in their body at a level where they're becoming the greatest in the world at something, like that for many people resonates. And so that can be an analogy. I'm not even necessarily a sports guy, other than like I play racquetball, and so I understand it through that context. But I can speak through that language because I know it resonates with so many people in the corporate world, and they understand when somebody's on a hot streak in an NBA game. They understand what it means to be in the zone, because they're all in fantasy football leagues. They all have played some kind of sports. They all understand what a runner's high is. So a lot of the entry points in the corporate world into talking about spirituality is from the perspective of sports or an athlete, because it's undeniable when Michael Phelps says, actually, one of the ways that I won so many gold medals is that I sat and visualized myself swimming as best as I could, and in my mind I practiced swimming even when I wasn't actually swimming. Well, it's undeniable that that was his process. He won 20 gold medals or whatever it was. And so that's an easy entry point, and a piece of data that you can use to kind of anchor some of these ideas where people can't just roll their eyes at them. Because people recognize that there's an intangible in being the best at that athletic level. And once they can grasp, okay, I believe that to be true for athletes and for physical performance, it's easier for them to make the leap that that might also be true in business. And sometimes we need to convince ourselves of that before we can go out and convince others of it. And building a spiritual business is really about getting up to speed with our own process. And you know that playful curiosity that you mentioned, Self, and that making the number one bullet point in your business plan, finding alignment, is really how you become a channel, right? You know, we think about a lot of times in spiritual groups, channeling maybe puts a bad taste in people's mouth, or you think, oh, I'm channeling an entity. But we learn, you know, Jamie Wheel did some great study on group ecstasis, and so why are events like Burning Man or music festivals so impactful on us? Why are they such salient moments? It's because our nervous system, you know, and the power plant in the center of our chest, this heart that we have, is creating this field, and that field can expand up to 30 feet or more around us. So we're walking around in a soup of overlapping energies. And when you go to church or to a group meditation or to these music festivals, what's happening is that anytime there are a bunch of people that have their consciousness all directed and focused on the same thing, that soup melds together in this really interesting way that feels like ecstasy. And we all become channels for that experience, and we're all sharing it in this collective experience. Well, you do that in the boardroom, you do that with the team that you've built in your business, you do that with your clients. There's an energetic overlap in this space right now, and the more alignment that you can find, the more that you become a clear channel for the energy of that room, for that soup of overlapping consciousness. And if you're the channel for that, you see this in AA all the time. AA is a great example of questions in the room getting answered, even if they weren't physically asked. And so that always happens. The clearest channel, the person that is most capable of expressing what the highest idea is going to have the creative impulse to speak it into the room. And our job is to get comfortable with expressing ourselves authentically, because that's how you open that channel up.
So many great points. I would like to go into one that I am very curious about. And it is when you mention all the sports and all this prime fitness, like performance, top performance. And of course, David Goggins was mentioned. And this is kind of, in my experience, the voice that we tend to use, and especially like high performers tend to use sometimes, which is like this judging, punishing voice, like pushing for more, like it's never enough. I still remember like Alex Hormozzi even said that most high achievers and rich people, they do it out of lack, like it's never enough, and they feel it's never enough, and they feel like they're not enough. And this is one of the dualities that I observed, that people who are kind of open to this don't want to do it because they think that will diminish their success, right? I've heard this, I've thought this in the past, like, but if I don't have that voice always reminding me that I'm not enough and I should want more, and I won't want more, and I'll be happy but unsuccessful. And I don't see it. It's not that I see it that way. I'm just speaking around with, like, playing devil's advocate with this idea. Have you seen that? Like, I mean, most of these guys at the top positions, I can imagine they're really harsh about themselves. And you may sometimes teach them how speaking with kindness will make it easier, right? Like, again, dissolving this resistance, being more playful about it. And while the David Goggins voice helps, and I can definitely vote for that, long term, I don't think it helps. And that's what leads to these burnouts, to this misalignment with whatever you wanted to do in the first place. What would be your perspective on that?
Well, ultimately, what alignment is about at the highest levels is learning to be comfortable with discomfort, because you can't grow without being in your stretch zone, and the stretch zone is temporarily uncomfortable. So if I'm talking to an executive about how they can acquire another business or move into a different sector or start a new product, there's some temporary discomfort there because it's out of their normal process and flow. And so there's a practical way of handling that by reverse engineering. Well, what would the process actually have to be to bring this into place? All processes are just permission slips to get into alignment, because the process makes you believe that you can actually do it because you know what steps to take. You don't necessarily need the process. The process will present itself to you in the moment if you can remain present. But because of the way that society and the world is structured, a lot of times your board of directors wants to see a plan. So, okay, we can create that plan, but let's do it from a place of alignment, right? Let's align our energies. Let's find that flow place. So, most business owners that I speak with, although there are a few that are, I would say, have a more elevated consciousness, and I can use the word kindness with them, but most executives are killers. They're not thinking about kindness, and so the way to talk to them is, well, how would SEAL Team 6 approach this? If you're in the special forces and your life is on the line, how do you create collective consciousness alignment so that as you move into this compound, and take the enemy, you're in sync and you're telepathic, you're using your telekinesis. That's the type of thing that executives can get behind, and they recognize that there is an intangible there, that there is a type of telepathy, and so, you know almost not almost always, the thing that I'm trying to suss out from the situation is, why did you even need to hire a consultant? Because hiring a consultant means that there's some problem or issue that you don't know how to solve, that you're not in alignment with. And so I use the Trojan horse of building out processes and giving them things that they can choose from. Executives like to have binary decisions. So typically I'll bring two business plans or two ideas of how something could be executed. And then I'm I'm coaching them into going with their gut on that, finding alignment, and then going with their gut on which process feels most aligned. And if neither of those feel aligned, then making sure that there's enough respect and a tight enough container in the room where everybody can speak what they feel isn't working, because that's the biggest place where people fail in business, is that they shove down the things that aren't working. They just don't want to acknowledge it. And so then that becomes this broken leg of and a lack of communication. And if you can create a tight enough container in your company, whether it's you or you and a client, or you and 100 employees, or you and 10,000 employees, the principles are the same. You create a container where anybody can communicate anything, and you recognize that the hive mind is always going to make itself stronger. And so you can hear some of the language that I use, where it's not really traditional spiritual language, but it's still pointing to the same concepts of, okay, we're connected at this intangible level, and unspoken feelings are always going to manifest themselves in some way. So can we head off uncomfortable feelings by making sure that there's an avenue for people to express that energy verbally rather than as agitation or mistakes?